Richard Lancaster picked up his phone, typed 11 words, and put it back down, without blinking. Happy birthday, Eva. The account has been credited. Father. No call, no candle, no warmth. Across the city, his daughter sat alone in a bakery, with a slice of cake she hadn't touched, in a wheelchair no one had asked about, on a birthday no one had shown up for. She was 22 years old, and she had never felt more invisible in her life. But then, a little girl with frosting on her fingers looked across the room and asked her father the 4 words that would change everything. Drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. And if it moves you, subscribe and stay with us, because this one, it's just getting started. The morning of Eva Lancaster's 22nd birthday began the way most of her mornings did, with the sound of someone being paid to care about her. Good morning, Miss Lancaster. Margaret, her live-in nurse, pulled back the curtains with practiced efficiency, the rings scraping against the rod in that sharp, metallic way that never failed to yank Eva out of whatever half-sleep she'd managed to find. It's your birthday today. Eva didn't answer. She lay on her back, staring at the ceiling, at the slow rotation of the ceiling fan her father had installed, because some specialist had said cool air circulation was beneficial for spinal cord patients. It was a ceiling fan that cost $4,000 and moved like it was barely trying. She wondered sometimes if it understood something she didn't. Your physical therapist is scheduled for 10, Margaret continued, already laying out Eva's clothes with the brisk precision of a woman who had learned long ago not to expect conversation before coffee. And your father's assistant called last night. He said, I know what he said. Eva pushed herself upright, the familiar resistance of her lower body reminding her of what it always reminded her of. That the girl who used to sprint barefoot across the back lawn of the Lancaster estate no longer existed. That girl had died on a wet road 3 years ago, and what had been left behind was this: a 22-year-old woman in a body that stopped listening to her below the waist, in a house full of expensive things, and not a single person who actually knew her. He said, "Happy birthday," Margaret offered carefully. He sent a text. Eva reached for the grip rail beside her bed. There's a difference. She didn't stay in the house. That was the one thing Eva had fought for, and won, in the long, exhausting war of small battles she waged with her father's world. She had her independence, modified, managed, monitored. But hers. She had her own car with hand controls, her own routes, her own rhythms. Richard Lancaster had tried, in the early months after the accident, to wrap her in a fortress of care so dense she could barely breathe. Specialists, round-the-clock nurses, a custom-built wing of the mansion, retrofitted for accessibility, a therapist on retainer, whose job, Eva suspected, was less about her mental health and more about managing her emotional responses so they didn't inconvenience her father's schedule. She had fought through every layer of it, and today, on her birthday, she drove herself to the one place she'd been coming to for the past 6 months, a small bakery on Clover Street called Millstones, and she ordered a slice of lemon cake and a black coffee. And she sat alone at the table near the window, and she waited. She didn't know what she was waiting for. That was maybe the most honest thing she could have admitted, if anyone had been there to hear it. She was waiting for something that felt real, something that wasn't arranged or paid for or scheduled. She was waiting for her father to call. He didn't call. At 9:14 in the morning, her phone buzzed on the table. She picked it up fast. Too fast, and she knew it. Hated herself a little for it, for the way hope still moved quicker than her own judgment. And she looked at the screen. Happy birthday, Eva. The account has been credited. Father. She stared at it for a long time. 11 words. He had given her 11 words, and 3 of them were her own name, and one of them was punctuation. And not one of them was "I love you" or "I'm coming" or "I'm sorry." The account has been credited. She set the phone face down on the table. She picked up her fork. She didn't eat the cake. The bakery filled up around her the way bakeries do on Saturday mornings. Slowly, then all at once. Couples with strollers, old men with newspapers folded under their arms, a group of women in workout gear who ordered green teas and talked over each other about a podcast Eva had never heard of. The barista, a college-aged kid named Trevor, who had given Eva a free coffee on her first visit and had never said a word about her wheelchair since, called out names and slid cups across the counter with cheerful indifference to everything but caffeine. Eva watched it all, the way she'd learned to watch the world from the other side of a window. Present. Contained. Separate. She had gotten good at separate. The door opened again at 9:47, and she wasn't paying attention. She was looking at her phone, at the 11 words. Not because she wanted to read them again, but because she was trying to understand how a man who had once carried her on his shoulders through a 4th of July crowd could have become someone who credited accounts on birthdays. And so she only caught it in her peripheral vision at first. A man. Broad-shouldered, work jacket, the kind of hands you notice because they're rough in a way that means they've actually done something with themselves. He was holding the door open with his back, which was how she realized he had a child with him. A little girl in a yellow raincoat that was too big for her. Rain boots that had cartoon frogs on them. And pigtails that were ambitious in concept, but clearly the work of a man doing his best. The little girl burst through the door like she'd been launched. "Daddy, they have the ones with the sprinkles and the ones with the flowers. Can I get both? I only want to look at both. I'm not going to eat both. I just want to—" "Lily." The man said it the way fathers say a name when they're simultaneously exhausted and completely in love. "One. We talked about one." "But what if the sprinkle one is sad that I didn't pick it?" "Cupcakes don't have feelings." The little girl, Lily, stopped walking, turned around, and looked at her father with the kind of expression usually reserved for people who have just said something cosmically wrong. "Daddy, everything has feelings." The man opened his mouth, closed it, looked at the ceiling briefly, as if requesting patience from a higher authority. "One cupcake, Lilybug." Lily turned back around, satisfied with her victory. And that was when she saw Eva. Eva saw the exact moment it happened. The little girl's eyes, dark brown, enormous, the kind of eyes that hadn't yet learned to look away from things, found her across the bakery. Found the wheelchair. Didn't flinch, didn't stare with the particular cruelty of unguarded adults. Just looked. The way children look at things they find genuinely interesting. And then Lily looked at Eva's table. At the untouched cake, at the phone lying face down, at the fact that Eva was completely, entirely alone. She tugged on her father's sleeve. "Daddy," she said, not quite whispering but trying to, "that lady is by herself on her birthday." The man looked up. His eyes moved to Eva. She watched him do what people usually did, the quick inventory, the wheelchair, the cake, the aloneness. Most people looked away after that, did the polite thing, which was the invisible thing, which was the thing that meant she could sit in a room full of people and still be utterly alone. He didn't look away. He looked at his daughter. "What makes you think it's her birthday?" he asked. Lily pointed, not rudely, just directly, with the unself-conscious certainty of a 6-year-old, at the single candle the bakery staff had placed in Eva's cake. A small thing. Trevor had done it without asking, without making a thing of it, just slid the plate across with a little flameless candle, because it was her birthday, and he'd remembered, and that small gesture had nearly made her cry that morning, which told her something about how starved she was for the ordinary kindnesses. "She has a birthday candle," Lily said. and nobody's singing to her. Her father was quiet for a moment. That doesn't necessarily mean, and she looked sad. Lily said it simply, not unkindly, just honestly, with the devastating accuracy of a child who hadn't yet learned to dress uncomfortable truths in comfortable clothes. Can we sit with her? Eva heard it. She'd been trying to appear like she hadn't, staring at her coffee, both hands wrapped around the mug. But the bakery was small, and the little girl had no concept of volume control, and Eva had heard every word. She felt something tighten in her chest, something she couldn't immediately name. The man was looking at her now, and she made herself meet his eyes, because she was Eva Lancaster, and she had been through 3 years of hard things, and she was not going to be the woman who couldn't hold eye contact with a stranger in a bakery on her birthday. He had kind eyes. That was the first thing. Not pretty kind, not the soft kind that came with pity. Steady kind. The kind of eyes that had seen some things and hadn't run from them. He crossed the bakery. His daughter was already ahead of him, already committed, already pulling out the chair across from Eva with both hands, and the complete confidence of someone who has never once considered the possibility of being unwanted. "Hi," Lily said, climbing onto the chair and planting both elbows on the table. "I'm Lily. That's my dad. He's Daniel. We're not weird, I promise. He just doesn't talk a lot when he's thinking. But he's thinking right now because he's trying to figure out if this is okay. And it is okay, right?" Eva stared at her. The man, Daniel, pulled out the chair beside his daughter and sat down and looked at Eva with an expression that was partly amused and partly apologetic, and partly something else she couldn't read yet. "You don't have to," he started. "It's okay," Eva said. And then, because she'd surprised herself by saying it, she said it again. "It's okay." Lily beamed. It was the kind of smile that had no calculation in it, no performance, just pure unguarded joy at the fact that the world had just gotten slightly better. "Is it really your birthday?" she asked. "It is. How old?" "Lily," Daniel said. 22, Eva said. Lily considered this with great seriousness. "That's really old." "Lily, but in a good way," Lily added, though her expression suggested she was still forming her opinion on the matter. "Do you have a birthday cake? We can sing to you. Daddy has a really good voice. He doesn't think he does, but he does." Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. "I really don't." "He does at bedtime. He sang to me last night, and it was really good." "That's different. That's just... I wasn't trying to..." "He sings the one about the river," Lily told Eva confidentially. "From the movie. He knows all the words." Eva felt something strange happening in her face. Something warm. Something she recognized after a moment as the very early stages of a smile. "What's your name?" Lily asked. "Eva." "Eva," Lily tested it. "That's pretty. Like the letter, almost. Do you like cupcakes? Daddy said I could only get one, but I made some yesterday with Grandma, and I brought one for Daddy, but he already ate breakfast, so maybe you want it? It's chocolate with pink frosting. I put stars on it because I like stars." Eva looked at Daniel. Daniel shrugged slightly, an expression that said, "This is just what she's like. I have no control over any of it. I've accepted this." "I made it myself," Lily said, already digging in the pocket of her too big raincoat. "Well, Grandma helped with the oven part, but I did the frosting and the stars." She produced a cupcake from her pocket. Slightly dented, the pink frosting smeared a little, 3 small silver star-shaped sprinkles clinging to the side where they'd migrated from the top. It was, objectively, the most imperfect cupcake Eva had ever seen. She took it. She didn't know why. She hadn't planned to. Her hands just moved. "Thank you," she said, and her voice came out slightly rough at the edges, which she hoped Lily was too young to notice. Lily straightened up in her chair, radiant with satisfaction. Then she looked at her father with an expression of absolute authority. "Daddy, sing." "Lily, we can't just—" "Daddy?" She used the voice. The voice that was somehow simultaneously a 6-year-old's request and an ancient, immovable force of nature. "It's her birthday. Sing." Daniel looked at Eva. There was something in his expression. Not embarrassment exactly, more like a man who has learned that some things are simply unstoppable, and that the only dignified response is to lean into them. "I apologize in advance," he said. And then, in a bakery on Clover Street on a Saturday morning in October, a carpenter named Daniel sang happy birthday to a woman he had known for approximately 4 minutes. His voice was low and a little uneven, and completely, utterly sincere. Lily joined in at the top of her lungs, off-key and entirely without shame, both hands flat on the table, leaning forward like she was trying to give the song more volume through sheer physical will. Trevor at the counter turned around. The women in workout gear paused their podcast conversation. 2 old men looked up from their newspapers. Eva Lancaster, who had not cried in front of another person since the first week in the hospital, when she hadn't yet learned how to build the walls, felt tears hit the back of her eyes so fast she didn't have time to stop them. She blinked hard. Once. Twice. She held it. But just barely. When the song ended, Lily sat back, satisfied, as if she had personally repaired something in the world. "You have to make a wish," she said. "The candle isn't lit," Eva said. "It doesn't matter. You still have to make a wish." Eva looked at the flameless candle, at the cake she still hadn't eaten, at the phone still lying face down on the table with her father's 11 words on the screen. She closed her eyes. She didn't wish for her legs back. She'd made that wish 100 times in the early days, bargaining with a God she wasn't sure she believed in, and it hadn't come. She didn't wish for her father to be different. She'd tried that wish too, and it had only taught her the difference between what you hope for and what is. She wished for something smaller. She wished to feel, just for a little while, like she was not invisible. She opened her eyes. Lily was watching her with complete attention. "Did you make a good one?" "I think so." Lily nodded seriously. "It'll come true. I always make good wishes, and they always come true. Eventually." She paused. "Except the one about the dog. Daddy says no dog, but I'm still working on that one." Daniel, to his credit, kept his expression carefully neutral. They stayed for an hour. Eva hadn't expected that. She'd assumed they would do the kind thing, sing the song, give the cupcake, feel good about themselves, and then move on to their Saturday. She had been prepared for a brief, lovely transaction of human kindness, and then the return to her ordinary aloneness. But Lily had opinions. About everything. About the cupcake flavors displayed in the case. About the name of the bakery. Why is it called Millstones? What's a millstone? Is it a stone from a mill? Why would you name a bakery after a stone? About Eva's chair. Does it go fast? Can I push it? Just a little? Just to see? About the rain outside. About a bird she'd seen from the car window on the way here that she was fairly certain had waved at her. And Daniel. Daniel let her talk. He didn't shush her or manage her or redirect her with the particular efficiency of an adult who finds children mildly inconvenient. He listened to her. He answered her questions with genuine consideration, even the absurd ones. When she said the bird had waved at her, he said, "What kind of wave? Like a greeting wave or like a help me wave?" And Lily had given this serious thought and concluded it was probably a greeting wave because the bird had looked happy. Eva watched him do this and felt something she couldn't immediately name. She thought about it on the drive home. The house was quiet when she got back. Margaret had Saturdays off, and the rest of the staff kept their distance unless called. Eva wheeled through the front hallway, past the oil portrait of the Lancaster family from before. The one commissioned when Eva was 16, when she was standing on two legs in a blue dress, her mother beside her, her father with his hand on her shoulder, looking powerful and proud. The picture of everything money could buy, and nothing it couldn't. She stopped in front of it. She thought about Lily asking, "Can we sit with her?" She thought about how that question, 4 words, from a 6-year-old who didn't know her name or her money or her family or her story, had done something in her chest that her father's 11 words had not. She thought, when was the last time anyone just wanted to be near me? Not to help me, not to manage me, just near me. She couldn't remember. She sat there in the hallway for a long time. Her phone buzzed. She thought, for one wild, unguarded second, Dad. It was Margaret, texting to confirm tomorrow's schedule. Eva looked at the portrait. She looked at the 16-year-old girl standing on 2 legs in the blue dress. "I miss you," she said, and she wasn't sure if she was talking to her mother, who had left 3 years before the accident. Not died, just left, which was its own kind of grief, or to herself. She wheeled to the window. Outside, the October rain came down steady and cold on the manicured lawn, and the trees her father had planted the year she was born were losing their leaves. And somewhere across the city, a 6-year-old girl with cartoon frogs on her boots was probably arguing about the definition of feelings with her father over whatever dinner he was making. Eva pressed 2 fingers against the cold glass. She thought, I want to know what that feels like. Not the money, not the house, not the staff. She wanted to know what it felt like to eat dinner with someone who sang off-key because they meant it. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a number she didn't recognize. She almost ignored it. She almost scrolled past. But she opened it. "Hi, this is Daniel. Trevor at the counter gave me your number. I asked if it was okay first. He said he thought you wouldn't mind. So if I'm wrong about that, I'm sorry. Lily wanted me to tell you that the wish will definitely come true. She's been thinking about it all afternoon, and she's very confident. Also, happy birthday, Eva. I mean it." Eva read it 3 times. She thought about the portrait behind her, about her father's 11 words, about the way a carpenter she'd met an hour ago had written more warmth into a text message than her father had managed in the last 3 years combined. She thought about Lily's voice, enormous and off-key, and completely without fear. She thought about the wish she had made with her eyes closed. She typed back, "Tell Lily thank you," and "I didn't mind." She stared at the screen for a moment. Then she typed, "Thank you for staying." She sent it before she could think too hard about it. Outside, the rain kept coming down. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Eva Lancaster sat in her father's house and felt, somewhere deep and quiet, like something had just begun. What she didn't know yet, what none of them knew, was that Richard Lancaster had eyes everywhere, and that what had begun in a bakery on a rainy Saturday morning was already, without any of them realizing it, on a collision course with everything her father had spent 3 years trying to control. The text sat in Daniel's phone for 6 minutes before he responded. He was standing at the kitchen counter, Lily already in her pajamas, and arguing the case for a second glass of apple juice with the conviction of someone who had studied constitutional law, and he kept picking up his phone and putting it back down, because he wasn't entirely sure what he was doing. He had asked Trevor for her number. He had done that. He, Daniel Avery, who had not asked for a woman's number in 4 years, who had told his mother just 3 weeks ago that he was fine. "Mom, Lily and I are fine. We don't need anything else." He had walked up to a 22-year-old barista and said, "The woman in the wheelchair. "Do you know if she'd mind if I texted her?" And Trevor had looked at him with the particular wisdom of a college kid who understood more about loneliness than he let on, and said, "I think she'd be okay with it." So he'd done it. And now she'd written back, "Thank you for staying." 4 words, and he had read them twice, and felt something shift in him that he wasn't prepared to examine too closely on a Saturday night, with the rain coming down and Lily demanding apple juice. "Daddy," Lily planted both hands on his arm. "Are you listening?" "One more glass," he said. "Small one." Lily pumped her fist. "Who are you texting?" "Nobody." "You're smiling at nobody." "I'm not smiling." "You were." She climbed onto the counter stool and watched him with unblinking certainty. "Is it Eva?" He looked at her. "How do you know her name?" "She told me, at the bakery. I remember everything." Lily accepted this as a simple fact of existence. "Is she nice?" "She seems nice." "I think she's sad." Lily said it matter-of-factly, the way she said most things. Not cruelly, not with drama, just as a statement of observed reality. Not crying sad, the other kind. Daniel leaned against the counter and looked at his daughter. She was 6 years old, and she had, on more than one occasion, seen things he hadn't. He didn't know where that came from. He suspected it came from the same place her stubbornness came from, and her laugh, and her tendency to fall asleep mid-sentence when she was fighting it. From her mother, from Sophie, who had been gone 4 years now, and whose absence had left a shape in their life that Daniel had stopped trying to fill, and started trying to simply live around. "The other kind," he repeated. "The kind where you're sad on the inside, but you're holding very still on the outside, so nobody knows." Lily reached for her juice glass with both hands. "I see it in kids at school sometimes, when they didn't get picked." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "Go brush your teeth," he said, and his voice was softer than usual. Lily slid off the stool. She was halfway down the hall when she turned around. "Daddy?" "Yeah?" "I think you should be her friend." He didn't answer, but after she disappeared into the bathroom, he picked up his phone and typed back to the number he'd saved as Eva, Bakery. "We're glad we stayed. Lily is currently telling me I should be your friend. She doesn't usually hand those out, so consider yourself vetted." 3 minutes passed. Then, "Tell her I'm honored. Vetting process seemed thorough." He laughed. Actually laughed. A short, surprised sound that he hadn't expected. And he stood there in his kitchen, with the rain coming down outside, and felt something he recognized, distantly, as the very early stages of not being completely alone. He almost typed something else. He stopped himself, put the phone down, went to read Lily her story. But he left the conversation open. They ran into each other on Wednesday, not by plan, or at least that was what Eva told herself on the drive to Millstones, even though she had gone on a Wednesday specifically because that was when she'd noticed, over the past several months of quiet observation, that the bakery was slower on Wednesday mornings, and Trevor made the lemon cake fresh on Tuesdays. She told herself it had nothing to do with the fact that Daniel had mentioned, at the end of their conversation on Saturday, that he usually grabbed coffee on weekday mornings from places near whatever job site he was working, and that he was working this week on Carver Street. Carver Street was 4 blocks from Millstones. Eva Lancaster had a graduate-level relationship with denial, so she was aware, on some level, that she was lying to herself. She chose to let it pass. He was already there when she came in, sitting at the counter with a paper coffee cup and a hard hat on the stool beside him, blueprints rolled up under his arm, talking to Trevor about something that involved hand gestures and what appeared to be a disagreement about load-bearing walls. He looked up when the door opened, and there was that half-second, that small, honest beat, where something moved across his face before he had time to arrange it into something neutral. It looked a lot like relief. "Hey," he said. "Hey," Eva said. Trevor looked between them with the expression of a young man who was watching something happen and had the good sense not to comment on it. "You worked nearby?" Daniel asked. I wanted coffee." She said it in a way that dared him to call her on it. He didn't. He just pulled the hard hat off the neighboring stool and set it on the floor and gestured at the empty seat. "Want company?" "Depends," she said. "Is Lily here?" "She's at school." "Then you're a poor substitute." But she was already moving toward the counter, and she could hear, from the quality of the silence behind her, that she had almost made him smile. She sat beside him. Trevor appeared with her usual coffee without being asked, and for a few minutes neither of them said anything that mattered. They talked about the bakery, about the rain that had finally cleared up, about the neighborhood. Normal things. Safe things. Out of nowhere. "How long ago was the accident?" She looked at him. Most people didn't ask. They either already knew, the Lancaster name had been in enough society columns that most people in this city could connect the dots, or they chose the performance of not knowing, which was its own particular insult. 3 years, she said. "Were you alone?" "Wet road. I was driving back from a friend's birthday. 2 a.m. She picked up her coffee. "T-bone at an intersection. The other driver ran a light. He walked away." She paused. "I used to be angry about that." "Used to?" "Still am. I just got better at where I put it." Daniel nodded slowly. He didn't say, "I'm sorry," in that reflexive way people did, the way that was more about their own discomfort than about your actual pain. He just absorbed it, let it be true without flinching from it. "How long have you been doing this on your own?" she asked, because it felt fair. "With Lily." He turned his coffee cup in his hands. "Since she was 2. Her mom, Sophie, heart condition. Nobody knew. She just..." He stopped, started again. "Lily doesn't remember her. Not really. She has a picture she keeps by her bed, but the actual memories..." He shook his head. "She's building them from what I tell her, which is a lot of pressure to get right." "What do you tell her?" "That she had her mom's eyes. That her mom used to sing to her at bedtime, and that's where the singing comes from." He looked at his hands. "That she was the kind of person who would have walked into a bakery on a Saturday morning and asked a stranger if she wanted company." Eva didn't say anything for a moment. "That's a good thing to tell her," she said finally. "I hope so." He looked up. "I figure if I tell her enough true things, the story she builds will be close enough to real that it won't break later." Eva held her coffee with both hands. She thought about her own father, about the story she had built of him, the man who carried her on his shoulders, the man who had clapped longest at her high school graduation, the man who had stood at her hospital bedside in the first hours after the accident, with a grief on his face that she had believed, fully and without reservation, was love. She thought about how that story had been slowly, methodically dismantled over 3 years by 11-word birthday texts and paid substitutes and phone calls that came through assistants. She thought about what it meant to build a story about someone from the true things. She had run out of true things to build with. "My father thinks he loves me," she said. She hadn't planned to say it. It came out of whatever the coffee and the company had loosened in her. "He genuinely believes it. He sends nurses and specialists and money, and I think in his mind that is love. It's just a different language." She paused. "One I can't read." Daniel looked at her. "Does he know that?" "No." She set her cup down. "He doesn't ask." "Have you told him?" "I've tried." She heard the flatness in her own voice. "He hears logistics. I say, I'm lonely. And he hears, the staffing arrangement isn't working. I say, I need you. And he hears, she needs a different specialist." She gave a short, humorless exhale. You can't translate grief to someone who only speaks solutions. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "My dad was like that too. Different version. Mine showed love by fixing things. Literally, physically. Broken step on the porch, squeaky door, bad wiring. If something was wrong, he fixed it. When my mom got sick, he retiled the entire bathroom." He paused. Because he didn't know what else to do. Did it help? No, but she understood what he was saying. So maybe that was enough. He looked at her sideways. The question is whether you can live with a language you can't read. She picked up her coffee again. I've been living with it for 22 years. Living with something and being okay with it aren't the same thing. She looked at him. He said it without accusation, without the performance of insight, just as a statement, clean and direct, the way he did most things. She had the feeling, sitting beside him, that this was a man who had stripped away a lot of the pretense that adults built around themselves over years of careful social navigation. Not because he was simple, because he had been through enough that pretense felt like a waste of time. "No," she said, "they're not." Trevor refilled their cups without being asked. Neither of them moved to leave. They stayed for 2 hours. It became a Wednesday thing, not by formal arrangement. They didn't schedule it or confirm it by text. It just happened. Wednesday mornings, millstones, the counter seats, Trevor's coffee. The way certain things happen when two people have found, in each other, a specific frequency of company that is rare enough to be worth returning to. Eva started noticing things about Daniel that she filed away without examination. The way he listened, not waiting for his turn to speak, actually listening, with the kind of focused attention that made you feel like the most important thing in the room. The way he talked about his work, not boasting, not diminishing, just describing, as if carpentry was simply what happened when he was present in the world. The calluses on his hands. The way he said Lily's name, every single time, without fail, like it was its own complete sentence. She noticed these things, and she didn't know what to do with them, and so she just kept showing up on Wednesdays. And then, 3 weeks after the bakery birthday, Lily came with him. She arrived in a different raincoat, blue this time, with white clouds, and the same frog boots. And she was already talking before she was fully through the door. Something about a caterpillar she'd found at school that her teacher had put in a jar, but Lily was worried about whether it was happy in the jar, and whether caterpillars had feelings about jars. She stopped when she saw Eva. Her whole face changed, the way a child's face changes when they see someone they like. Open, unguarded, lit from inside. "Eva!" She crossed the bakery at a run, which was the only speed Lily seemed to operate at, and stopped just short of her, with the particular restraint of a child who had been taught something about personal space, but found it genuinely inconvenient. "You're here! Daddy, she's here!" "I see that," Daniel said, taking the stool on the other side. "I thought you might be here, but I didn't know. And then you were." Lily climbed onto the stool beside Eva and turned to face her with complete attention. "Did you know caterpillars can feel things? I looked it up. Well, Daddy looked it up, but I watched." "What did you find out?" Eva asked. "They feel pressure," Lily said, with the gravity of someone delivering important news. "So if you hold them too tight, it bothers them. You have to hold them really, really gently." She demonstrated with her own hands, cupping the air with a tenderness that made Eva's chest do something complicated. Like this, so they know they're safe, but not stuck. Daniel was looking at his daughter with an expression Eva had seen on him before. That particular blend of exhaustion and bottomless love that she had started to think of as his signature expression. The one that told you everything you needed to know about who this man was. "She made the caterpillar a little sign," he said. "It says, 'You are loved,'" Lily confirmed, without embarrassment. Because I didn't know if anyone had told it. Eva looked at the little girl beside her, at the absolute sincerity in her face, at the unself-conscious way she moved through the world, attaching love to things as naturally as breathing. "That was very kind of you," Eva said. Lily shrugged, satisfied. "It's not that hard. You just have to remember to say it." Eva felt it again, that specific tightening in her chest, the one that had nothing to do with pain and everything to do with something she'd been moving around carefully for years. Like a bruise you'd stopped noticing until someone pressed it gently. You just have to remember to say it. She thought about 11 words on a screen, about an account being credited, about how her father moved through the world with great efficiency and profound silence, fixing everything that could be fixed by money, and never once looking at the things that couldn't. She thought, he never told me. Not once. Not in words she could hold. And then she thought, I never told him either. She pushed the thought away. It was too big for a Wednesday morning at a bakery counter. Lily was now interrogating Trevor about whether the chocolate croissants were made fresh or frozen.
Because there's a difference, Trevor. You can taste it.
And Daniel was watching his daughter with that expression. And Eva was watching Daniel watch his daughter. And something about the three of them in that small space, on that ordinary Wednesday, felt more like warmth than anything she'd sat inside in years. She's incredible, Eva said quietly, not quite meaning to say it out loud. Daniel turned to look at her. There was something careful in his expression. Careful not in a guarded way, but in the way of someone who is being precise. She's everything, he said, simply, without decoration. Eva held his eyes for a moment. Then Lily was back, victorious, announcing that the croissants were in fact fresh, and that Trevor had admitted it, and that she would be having one with her hot chocolate, and that Eva should have one too. Eva had the croissant. And sitting there, between a carpenter who said true things and a 6-year-old who put signs in jars so caterpillars knew they were loved, she felt the specific, unfamiliar warmth of being not managed, not arranged, not handled, just included. It was a Friday in November when things shifted. Eva had gone to a meeting with her father's estate lawyers, one of the quarterly reviews of the trust her grandfather had established. The kind of meeting where men in expensive suits spoke to her as though she were a moderately intelligent ornament. And she was driving back, still rigid from 2 hours of being talked at, when her phone rang through the car speakers. She expected Daniel. They'd been texting more through the week, not about anything in particular, just the small daily exchange that had started to feel like a habit she wanted to keep. A picture Lily had drawn at school, a question about whether Eva had read a book he'd found at the used bookstore, a complaint from Eva about the estate lawyer's condescension, a reply from Daniel that said only, "Next time bring Lily. Nobody condescends to anyone when she's in the room." But it wasn't Daniel's name on the screen. It was her father's. Not his assistant, not the estate office, his personal number. Richard Lancaster called his daughter's cell phone so rarely that Eva genuinely could not remember the last time she had seen that particular contact name appear on an incoming call. She sat at a red light and stared at it for long enough that it almost went to voicemail. And then she picked up. Eva. Her father's voice was what it always was, measured, controlled, the voice of a man who had spent 40 years in boardrooms and had long since stopped distinguishing between how he spoke in them and how he spoke everywhere else. "Dad," she pulled through the intersection. "This is unexpected. Are you free this weekend?" She almost laughed. "You're asking if I'm free?" A slight pause. "I thought we might have dinner. Sunday." Eva kept both hands on the wheel. She was trying to read the tone, the thing underneath the words, the frequency she'd been trained since childhood to listen for, the one that told you whether this was a genuine reach or a maneuver. She couldn't read it. "Sure," she said carefully. Sunday. 7 o'clock. The house.
I'll be there.
Good. Another pause, slightly longer than strictly necessary. How are you? Not a question. A statement with a question mark attached. The kind that didn't actually require an answer, and both of them knew it. Fine, Eva said. Good. And then, see you Sunday. And he was gone. Eva sat with the silence in the car for a block and a half. She texted Daniel at the next red light. My father just called me. He actually called me. He wants to have dinner on Sunday. The response came back in under a minute. How do you feel about that? She stared at the question. It was such a simple question. The kind a therapist would ask. The kind that sounded easy and was actually the hardest question in the world. I don't know yet, she typed. I keep trying to decide if I should be hopeful or careful. Can you be both? She put her phone down and drove through the city, and she thought about being both at once, hopeful and careful, open and guarded, and whether a person could hold those two things without one of them eventually collapsing the other. She didn't have an answer, but she showed up at her father's house on Sunday. The dining room in the Lancaster house had 12 seats and a table that had belonged to her grandfather, and on Sunday night there were only 2 places set, one at the head where Richard always sat, and one to his right where Eva had sat her entire life. She noticed when Margaret brought her in that her father had dismissed the other staff for the evening. No servers hovering, no assistant with a tablet. Just Richard Lancaster sitting at the head of his table with a glass of red wine, looking, Eva thought, older than the last time she'd sat across from him. He stood when she came in. He had always done that. Whatever else he was, her father stood when she entered a room. She had never decided whether it was courtesy or performance. Eva. He helped her position herself at the table with the careful, somewhat stiff competence of a man who had learned the logistics, but not the ease. You look well. Thank you. She put her napkin in her lap. You called me. He sat down. I did. That's unusual. He reached for his wine, set it down without drinking. I know. They sat in silence, while Margaret appeared briefly to pour Eva's water and then disappeared again, and Eva studied her father's face in the candlelight and thought, he's nervous. Richard Lancaster, CEO of Lancaster Group, board member, 58-year-old man who had once been photographed shaking hands with 2 sitting presidents, was nervous. How was your week? He asked. Dad, she said it quietly. Why am I here? He looked at her for a moment. Then he said, I heard you've been spending time with someone. Eva went very still. Someone in particular, her father continued. A tradesman and his daughter. She said nothing. She was calculating, measuring the temperature of the room, the words he was choosing, the angle of his jaw. I'm not here to criticize, he started. Then don't. Her voice was level, contained, the voice she'd learned in boardrooms of her own, negotiating her own terms in the long, exhausting war of being Richard Lancaster's daughter. If that's why you called me, if this dinner exists because you heard something and you want to manage it, then I'd like to know that now so I can decide whether to stay for the main course. Richard Lancaster put down his fork. He looked at his daughter across the 12-seat table, in the house he had built and staffed and maintained as a monument to everything he had provided. And something moved across his face that Eva had seen very rarely. Something that was less controlled than his usual expressions. Something that was, she thought, closer to real. I called you, he said slowly, because you haven't called me in 6 weeks. She held his eyes. You've never called me either. I know that. The silence stretched between them like the length of the table. Eva, he said, and his voice was different now, stripped of the boardroom coating, smaller, more careful. I don't know who this man is. His name is Daniel. He's a carpenter. He has a 6-year-old daughter named Lily. She paused. He stayed when no one else did. Her father absorbed that. I want to know you're safe, he said. I know you do. She looked at him steadily. But Dad, that's not what I need you to want. He said nothing. But she watched his face, and she saw it. The thing underneath the management and the control and the boardroom stillness. She saw the gap. The place where something had been missing for so long that neither of them had the language to name it anymore. She picked up her fork. Tell me about your week, she said. And she meant it, not as a deflection, as an opening, because she was trying. She was trying to be both at once, hopeful and careful, and not yet ready to give up on the man who had stood when she walked into rooms, even if she wasn't sure anymore what that meant. The dinner lasted 2 hours. At the end of it, nothing was resolved. But something had been cracked open, and Eva drove home under November stars, thinking about what Daniel had said. Can you be both? And thinking that maybe the answer wasn't yes or no. Maybe the answer was, I'm going to try. The thing about trying to be both hopeful and careful was that it required a kind of internal balance Eva had never been particularly good at. She was, by nature, a person who committed. Before the accident, she had been the girl who signed up for everything, threw herself at life with the particular fearlessness of someone who hasn't yet learned that the ground can come up fast. After the accident, she had become, by necessity, someone who measured, who calculated, who kept her weight distributed evenly so nothing could knock her sideways. Daniel was making the balance harder, not because he was trying to. That was the thing about him. He didn't try at her. He didn't push, didn't pursue in the way that men sometimes did when they sensed someone keeping them at a careful distance. That particular persistence that was more about ego than actual interest. He just kept showing up. Wednesdays at the bakery, texts throughout the week that were sometimes funny, and sometimes just a single observation. A strange cloud formation he'd seen from a job site roof. A sentence from the used bookstore book that he thought she'd appreciate. And sometimes, late in the evening, the kind of message that didn't ask for anything except to say, thinking about what you said earlier, I think you were right. He made it hard to keep measuring, because he never gave her a reason to. And Lily was completely beyond the reach of Eva's careful calculations. You could not be strategic about a 6-year-old who showed up on Wednesday mornings with drawings she had made specifically for you, who remembered things you'd mentioned in passing with the fidelity of a court reporter, who once, out of nowhere, took Eva's hand across the bakery counter and said, I'm really glad you were there on your birthday. With a directness that bypassed every wall Eva had built and landed somewhere in the center of her, like a stone dropped into still water. It was December now, 6 weeks since the birthday. 6 weeks since a rainy Saturday had rearranged something in the architecture of her ordinary life. And Eva was aware, in the way you are aware of a change in weather before it arrives, that pressure shift behind the eyes, that she was no longer keeping her weight evenly distributed. She was leaning toward them. She wasn't sure what to do about that. She was still thinking about it on a Thursday afternoon when her phone rang, and it was her father's assistant, a precise woman named Carol, who had worked for Richard Lancaster for 11 years, and who spoke in complete sentences that were organized like legal briefs. Miss Lancaster, your father would like to schedule a meeting at the Lancaster Group offices. This Friday, 2 o'clock. He asks that you confirm. Eva was in the middle of something. A book, a cup of tea, the particular Thursday afternoon quiet she had come to think of as hers. A meeting, she said. Not dinner, a meeting. His words were, a meeting, yes.
About what?
A very brief pause, the kind that meant Carol knew and had been instructed not to say. He didn't specify. Shall I confirm? Eva stared at the ceiling. Yes, she said. Confirm. She hung up and thought about Sunday dinner, about the crack in her father's face, when she'd said he stayed when no one else did. She thought about what a man like Richard Lancaster did with a crack, whether he worked to widen it or spent the week applying sealant. She texted Daniel, "My father wants a meeting at his office tomorrow." The response came quickly. Different from a dinner. Very different. Dinners are personal. Meetings are business, he finished. She stared at the word on her screen. Yeah, she typed back. Are you going to go? She thought about it for exactly 4 seconds. I already confirmed. You want me to? No, she typed before he could finish. I need to handle this one myself. A pause, then, okay, I'll be here when you're done. She put the phone down, picked up her book. Didn't read a single word of it. The Lancaster Group occupied 3 floors of a building downtown that had been designed to communicate without ambiguity that the people inside it made important decisions. Eva had been here many times growing up. Her father had occasionally brought her to the office on school holidays, with the vague idea that exposure to his world would be formative. She had sat in the waiting room with juice boxes and coloring books, while men in suits walked past without looking at her, and she had absorbed, without being able to name it then, the particular lesson those visits were actually teaching, that this place was her father's real home, and she was a guest in it. She signed in at the front desk. The receptionist, new since she'd last been here, young, very professional, told her Mr. Lancaster was ready for her, as if there had ever been a version of this where he wasn't. The elevator opened directly into his office suite on the top floor. His assistant greeted her, offered water, led her to the conference room, not his personal office, the conference room, and even noted that detail the way you noted things that mattered. His personal office was where he had conversations. The conference room was where he conducted business. Her father was already standing when she came in. He was in his full professional presentation. Charcoal suit, silver tie, everything about him assembled with the precision of a man who understood that appearance was leverage. He gestured to the chair across from him, and Eva positioned herself at the table, and she looked at him across the polished surface, and she waited. Richard Lancaster sat down. He folded his hands. He looked at his daughter the way he looked at a difficult quarter, with the focused attention of someone preparing to manage a situation. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I was curious," she said. He nodded once. "I'll be direct. Please." He looked at her steadily. "I've had some inquiries made about Daniel Avery." The name in her father's mouth sounded wrong, the way a word sounds wrong when someone mispronounces it slightly. Close enough to right, but off in some essential way. Eva kept her face neutral. She had learned this room, this posture, this particular stillness from the man sitting across from her. Whatever he was about to do, she would not give him the satisfaction of seeing it land. "You had him investigated," she said. "I had information gathered. There's a difference." "Is there?" He opened a slim folder on the table. Eva looked at it and felt something cold move through her. Not fear exactly. Something more like recognition. The recognition of a pattern she had seen before, had watched her father deploy in boardrooms and negotiations. The sudden introduction of documented information as a form of power. She had just never been on this side of the table before. "He's 34, her father said. Works independently. Avery Carpentry. Sole proprietor, licensed, reasonable reputation. His wife, Sophie Avery, née Cormack, died 4 years ago. Heart. He has a daughter, Lily, age 6. He paused. He owns a rental property on Becker Street. 2 bedrooms. He has some debt, nothing alarming. A truck payment, a small line of credit. Eva let the silence sit for a moment after he finished. You read me his file, she said, like I don't know him. Eva, you put together a file on a man I have coffee with on Wednesday mornings, and you read it to me across a conference table. She kept her voice even, absolutely even. I need you to understand what that looks like from where I'm sitting. Her father's jaw shifted slightly. I'm protecting you. From what? From making decisions based on what, Dad? On what? She put both hands flat on the table. Not aggressive, just present, grounded. Say it. Say what you're actually afraid of. He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw it. The same thing she'd seen at dinner last Sunday. That gap in the facade. But this time, instead of something raw, what came through was something defensive. The way a man closes up when he's been seen doing something he knows, on some level, isn't right. He's not your world, Eva. He's not trying to be my world. He's my friend. Men like that. Men like what? She said it quietly, and the quiet of it was more dangerous than volume would have been. Men who build things with their hands? Men who raise their daughters alone? Men who walked into a bakery on my birthday and actually saw me. What kind of man is that, Dad? Tell me, because I genuinely want to know what category you've put him in. Richard Lancaster was quiet. You want to know the difference between Daniel Avery and every other person in my life? She leaned forward slightly. He doesn't know what's in my trust fund. He doesn't know how many employees you have. He doesn't know the name Lancaster means anything beyond the sign outside this building. He bought me a coffee once, one coffee, and he argued with me about it, because he said it was a thing people do for each other, and he didn't want me to feel like a transaction. She stopped. Let that word sit between them. Transaction. Do you know the last time someone used that word in relation to me and meant the opposite of what you mean when you credit my account on my birthday? Her father said nothing, but something was happening in his face, a tightening that she recognized after a moment as a man trying not to react. I'm not going to stop seeing him, she said. Richard picked up his pen, set it down. A habitual gesture. She'd seen him do it 1,000 times. A way of buying seconds. I could make things difficult, he said. It came out flat. Not quite a threat. A statement of capability. Eva went very still. She looked at her father across the conference table in the building that bore her family name, at the man who had carried her on his shoulders through 4th of July crowds and hadn't called her on her birthday. And she understood, in a way she hadn't quite let herself understand before, what she was dealing with. Not a father struggling to connect, not a man limited by his emotional vocabulary. A man who, when faced with something he couldn't control, reached for the lever of power. Are you threatening him? She said. I'm explaining options. That's what a threat is, Dad. When you explain options that involve harm to someone who hasn't done anything wrong. She held his eyes. If you touch his business, if you make calls, pull strings, do anything to interfere with Daniel Avery's livelihood because of his association with me, I will move out of that house. She said it calmly, carefully, like each word was load-bearing. I will take exactly what I need, and I will leave, and I will not come back. And you will have succeeded in having everything you've always had. This building, your board, your accounts, and absolutely nothing that matters. The room was very quiet. Her father looked at her, and she watched him, watched the leverage and management expression hold for a moment, and then something underneath it shift. He was not a man who was moved easily. She had known that her whole life. But she was his daughter, and she had his stubbornness, and she was looking at him with the kind of clarity that only comes from someone who has spent 3 years thinking very carefully about what they actually have to lose. "Eva," he said. His voice was different, quieter. "I mean it," she said. He set down his pen for the last time. "I know," he said, and she believed him. She left the conference room. She didn't look back. She rode the elevator down through the floors of her family's name, and she walked out through the lobby, past the young receptionist and the men in suits, and she got into her car. And she sat there for 3 full minutes without starting the engine. Her hands were steady on the wheel. She noticed that. She had expected them to shake. They didn't. She texted Daniel. "Done. I'm okay." He responded in 30 seconds. "Good. You eat?" She almost smiled. "Not since this morning." "We're making soup. Come." She stared at the message. "We're making soup. Come." 4 words that were somehow the complete opposite of her father's 11. 4 words that contained, in their ordinary smallness, everything she'd been trying to name for 6 weeks. "I don't want to intrude," she typed. "Lily has been asking if you can come to dinner for 3 Wednesdays. This is not intruding. This is rescuing me from an ongoing campaign." She looked up through the windshield at the building above her, at the glass and steel that her grandfather had built and her father had maintained, and that had, for as long as she could remember, represented the weight of the Lancaster name pressing down on everything that grew too close to it. She started the car. She drove across the city to a 2-bedroom rental on Becker Street, where a carpenter was making soup, and a 6-year-old was conducting a campaign. And she told herself she was just going for dinner. She knew, driving there, that it was more than that. The apartment was nothing like her father's house. That was the first thing. Not a judgment, just the simple fact of it. It was small and warm, and there were crayon drawings on the refrigerator, held up with mismatched magnets. And there was a pair of Lily's rain boots by the door, and a toolbox in the hallway, and a bookshelf that was organized less by system and more by enthusiasm. Paperbacks wedged sideways on top of standing ones. A library book with a bookmark made from a folded receipt. A copy of Charlotte's Web that had clearly been read until it had feelings about being read. Lily answered the door before Eva had finished knocking. "You came!" She said it with the specific joy of someone whose expectations have been exceeded, which, Eva would learn, was how Lily greeted most good things. "Daddy, she came! I told you she'd come!" "You said 40-60, Daniel called from the kitchen. "I was being modest." Lily grabbed Eva's hand and began the immediate process of showing her everything that was important. The caterpillar's jar, now empty because he had become a butterfly last week and they had let him go, which Lily described with a mixture of pride and grief that accompanied any right and difficult thing. The drawing she had made of the 4 of them at the bakery, which included Eva's wheelchair rendered in blue crayon and labeled Eva's Fast Chair. The corner of the living room where she kept what she called her important things collection, which included a smooth gray stone, a button she'd found on the sidewalk, a birthday card from her grandmother, and, Eva noticed, a silver, star-shaped sprinkle in a small plastic bag. "That's from your birthday cupcake," Lily said. "I saved it." Eva looked at the small plastic bag with the single star sprinkle and felt the familiar pressure behind her eyes. "Why?" Lily considered the question with great seriousness. "Because it was a good day, and I didn't want to forget it was a good day." She picked up the bag and looked at it. Good days should be kept somewhere safe. Eva cleared her throat. "That's very smart," she said. "I know." Lily replaced the star in its position of honor among the important things. "Come on, dinner's almost ready." Daniel was in the kitchen, a kitchen that was roughly the size of her father's pantry and contained, Eva observed, more actual human activity than any room in the Lancaster house. He was stirring something in a large pot and had the expression of a man who was maintaining two conversations simultaneously and had made peace with this. "She showed you the important things?" he said.
She did.
"Including the—"
Yes.
He glanced at her over his shoulder. Something in his expression, a checking-in quality, a quiet, "How are you?" actually, that said more than the words around it. "You okay?"
Getting there.
He nodded, turned back to the soup. "Sit anywhere. That stool there is the good one. The other one wobbles. I keep meaning to fix it, which is either ironic or just predictable." "Bit of both," Eva said, and she wheeled to the counter and positioned herself, and the kitchen closed around her with its warmth and its crayon drawings and its wobble stool irony, and she thought, this is what it's supposed to feel like. She had spent 22 years in rooms designed to impress. This room was designed, if it was designed at all, simply to live in, and the difference was not small. Lily climbed onto the wobble stool. It wobbled. She seemed to find this acceptable.
"What happened with your dad today?" she asked Eva,
with the conversational fluency of someone who had been listening to adult conversations all her life and saw no reason to pretend otherwise. Daniel made a small sound from the stove.
"Lily, it's okay,"
Eva said. She looked at the little girl. "I had a meeting with him. At his office."
"Is he nice?"
Lily asked. Eva thought about it.
"He's complicated."
Lily processed this with a thoughtful nod. "Like how Mr. Henderson at school is mean, but then sometimes gives you extra time on the puzzle if you ask nicely." "Something like that." "Complicated people are hard," Lily said with the authority of lived experience. "But Daddy says usually there's a reason people are hard, like how a nut is hard because there's something soft inside that needs protecting." She glanced at her father. "Right?" Daniel was quiet for a beat. "Right," he said. Eva looked at her hands. At the conference table, her hands had been steady. Now, in this small, warm kitchen, they were less so. Not shaking, just less armored, less maintained, as if the particular effort she'd spent all afternoon holding herself together was coming undone now that there was somewhere safe to put it down. "He threatened Daniel's business," she said. She didn't mean to say it out loud, not in front of Lily, but it came out before she could stop it. The stirring stopped. Lily looked between them. Daniel turned around. He looked at Eva with an expression she couldn't fully read. Not shock, she thought, but something like a man absorbing a piece of information he'd been half expecting and finding that the expectation didn't make it easier. "He threatened," he started. "Implied. Strongly." Eva met his eyes. "I told him if he did anything, I'd leave the house and not come back. I think he believed me." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. The soup made a soft sound behind him. "Eva," he said, "you don't have to do that." "I know I don't have to. Leaving your father's house, that's not a small thing. You shouldn't put that on the table because of me." "I didn't do it because of you," she said it clearly. "I did it because I am 22 years old and I have been managed and handled and arranged for 3 years, and I have never once looked my father in the face and said, 'You don't get to do that.' And today I did." She paused. "You were incidental." He raised an eyebrow slightly. "That came out wrong," she said. "A little. You know what I mean." "I do," he said. And there was something in his voice when he said it. A quietness that was not agreement exactly, but recognition. The sound of a person who understood the difference between being someone's reason and being someone's catalyst. Lily, who had been following this exchange with her head moving back and forth like she was watching tennis, determined that the important parts were finished, and turned to Eva with her next question ready. "Are you going to keep coming to the bakery on Wednesdays?" "Yes," Eva said. "Are you going to come to dinner again?" Eva looked at Daniel. He looked back at her with the steady, kind eyes and the expression that waited without pressure. "If I'm invited," she said. Lily threw both arms up. "You're invited, right, Daddy? She's invited every time?" "Every time," Daniel said, and he turned back to the stove, but not before Eva saw it. The smallest thing, barely there, gone almost before she could confirm it. The corner of his mouth lifting. She let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. Lily launched into a description of a game she was inventing that involved the Important Things collection and a set of rules she was still developing. And Daniel served the soup in mismatched bowls, and Eva sat in the kitchen on the good stool, while Lily explained the game with escalating complexity. And Daniel ate his soup with the patient expression of a man who had learned that some monologues simply needed to run their course. And for an hour and 15 minutes, nothing was complicated. Eva hadn't had an hour and 15 minutes like that in 3 years, possibly longer. She was on her way home, navigating the familiar route in the dark, when the call came. Not her father this time, his attorney, a man named Gerald Holt, who had worked for the Lancaster family since before Eva was born, and whose voice always carried the particular gravity of very old money moving slowly and with complete confidence in its own weight. "Miss Lancaster." Gerald Holt never apologized for calling late. "Your father has asked me to reach out regarding the terms of your grandfather's trust." Eva's hands tightened on the wheel. "What about them?" "He would like to discuss a modification to the distribution structure. Specifically, the conditions under which quarterly disbursements are made." Eva drove through an intersection. "He wants to attach conditions to my trust distribution. He's exploring the option of, tell him no." She kept driving. "Tell him that what he's suggesting is exactly the kind of thing that will make what I told him this afternoon become a certainty rather than a warning." She paused. "Gerald, how long have you known my father?" A pause. 26 years. Does this sound like a man making a good decision?" A longer pause. "Miss Lancaster, I'm simply conveying—" "I know. Convey my answer." She merged onto the highway. "Good night, Gerald." She hung up. The highway opened ahead of her, the city lights spreading wide on either side, and she drove through the dark with her hands steady and her jaw set, and something rising in her chest that was not quite anger and not quite grief, and was perhaps, she thought, feeling her way around the edges of it, the particular fury of someone who has been loved badly for a very long time, and has only just now learned the word for it. Her phone buzzed on the seat. She glanced at it at the next light. "Come back." And below that, after a "come back," and below that, after a moment, "In case you come back" isn't quite right. It should say, "For when you come back," because she knows you will. Eva sat at the red light, with the city around her and her father's attorney cooling his heels in an office somewhere, and the full weight of the Lancaster name pressing down on everything it could reach. She read the message again. "For when you come back, because she knows you will." She thought about what a 6-year-old saved a piece of bread for someone, labeled it, kept it. She thought about how that was an act of total, unconditional belief. Not hope, not wishing, but knowing. The kind of certainty that didn't second-guess itself or hedge its bets or attach conditions. She thought about the difference between that and a trust fund with modified disbursement conditions. She thought, there is no version of this story where my father wins. Not because she was angry. She was, yes. But underneath the anger was something steadier. Something that had been built over 6 weeks of Wednesday mornings and soup kitchens and Important Things collections and texts at the end of hard days, and a single silver star sprinkle kept in a plastic bag because a good day should be kept somewhere safe. She was not the girl in the blue dress in the portrait. She was not the problem to be managed. She was not the trust fund, or the liability, or the complicated quarterly review. She was Eva Lancaster, and she had just eaten soup from a mismatched bowl, and it was the best meal she'd had in 3 years. The light turned green. She drove home. She texted back, "Tell her I know I will too. And tell her, save the bread. I'll be there Sunday." She put the phone down. For the first time since the conference room, she felt the thing that had been tight in her chest begin slowly to release. Her father could move money. He could call attorneys. He could put conditions on distributions and have people investigated and conduct meetings in conference rooms and reach for levers of power with the smooth efficiency of a man who had been doing it for 40 years. What he could not do was undo a Wednesday morning. He could not unmake a birthday song from a man who apologized in advance and meant every word. He could not unlight the thing that a child's 4 words had lit in her. "Can we sit with you?" Everything that mattered had started with that. And whatever was coming next, and she could feel it, the pressure behind her eyes, the weather shift, it would not be able to touch that. She was sure of it. For now, Sunday came the way Eva had been both wanting and dreading it. Too fast, with the particular clarity of a day that knows it matters. She showed up at Becker Street at noon, with the bread from the previous Thursday still in her mind. And Lily answered the door again. And the morning unfolded with the easy warmth that had become its own kind of gravity. They ate lunch. Lily demanded a rematch of a card game she had invented, and then modified 3 times since the previous visit to better suit her winning. Daniel fixed the wobble stool, finally, in 15 minutes, with tools from the hallway box, while Eva sat at the counter and pretended not to watch him work with the focused, quiet competence of a man who understood exactly what he was doing. "You're staring," he said, not looking up. "I'm observing," she said. "There's a difference? Staring is impolite. Observing is intellectual." He looked up then, a brief, sideways look with something warm in it. "Right." Lily, from her position on the floor, surrounded by cards, looked up at both of them and made no comment, which was unusual enough that Eva noticed it. It was the best Sunday she'd had in years. She drove home that evening with the windows down despite the cold, because she wanted the air on her face, wanted to feel something unmanaged and direct. She didn't know it would be the last uncomplicated day for a while. She found out about it on a Tuesday, from a phone call she almost didn't take because the number showed a local area code she didn't recognize, and she had learned to be cautious about numbers she didn't recognize ever since Gerald Holt's late-night call. She picked up. The voice on the other end belonged to a man named Walt Briggs, who introduced himself as the property manager of the building where Daniel currently held a 6-month contract for a renovation project on the 3rd and 4th floors. He spoke in the careful, apologetic tone of someone delivering news they didn't want to be delivering. "I'm sorry to call you directly, Miss Lancaster. I got your number from... I wasn't sure who else to contact. Mr. Avery doesn't know I'm calling." Eva went still. "What happened?" "The contract was pulled this morning. The building's ownership group. They cited a change in scope, which is technically within their rights under the agreement, but..." He stopped. "Miss Lancaster, this job was worth 8 months of income for Mr. Avery. It's December. He's got another small job in January, but nothing after that until spring. And the ownership group..." Another pause, waited. "They gave no advance warning, no negotiation, just a call this morning. 36 hours to clear the site." Eva's hand was very tight on the phone. "Who owns the building?" she said. Her voice was level. She had been practicing level for 3 years. She was very good at it. Walt hesitated. "I need to know," she said. "It's a holding company, Dalton Property Group." He paused. "I looked into it this morning after the call. Dalton was acquired 8 months ago by a parent company, Lancaster Capital Holdings." The silence was complete. "Thank you, Walt," Eva said. "I appreciate you telling me." She hung up. She sat in her car. She'd been about to go into the pharmacy when the call came, and she held the phone in both hands and breathed through the specific, particular fury of someone who had given a warning and been ignored, who had drawn a line and watched it be crossed in the most deliberate, precise way possible. Not crude, not angry. Surgical. Her father didn't do anything crude. He moved money and entities and structures with the smooth efficiency of someone who had never needed to raise his voice, because he had never been in a room where money couldn't do his talking for him. She thought about Daniel's face on the day she'd told him about the conference room threat. "You don't have to do that." She thought about how he'd said it, not scared for himself, not calculating damage, just a man who didn't want her to spend herself on his behalf. She called him. He picked up on the second ring. She could hear the background sounds of a job site, voices, something mechanical, and then the sound of him stepping somewhere quieter. "Hey," he said, "everything okay?" "Did you get a call this morning?" she said. A pause. 2 seconds. 3. "Yeah." "About the Dalton contract." Another pause. "Eva, my father owns the building, Daniel." The silence that followed was long enough that she began to understand its shape. He already knew, or had suspected, or had made the connection the same way she had, and had been sitting with it since morning, deciding what to do with it. "I figured it was possible," he said. "You figured it was possible, and you didn't call me? What would you have done if I'd called you?" She opened her mouth, closed it, because the answer was exactly what she was doing right now. Calling him, ready to go to war, ready to do the things she'd threatened to do. And he had known that, and he had spent the morning trying to decide if he wanted to be the reason she did it. "Daniel." "I'm okay," he said. "It's a setback. I've had setbacks." "It's not a setback, it's sabotage, and you know that." "I know that." His voice was steady. She could hear him working to keep it that way. "But Eva, listen to me. This is between you and your father. What he did is wrong. I'm not arguing that. But I don't want to be the thing you blow your life up over." "I told him if he did this." "I know what you told him." "Then you know I meant it." "I know you meant it when you said it." He paused. "The question is whether you mean it now, that it's not hypothetical." She looked through the windshield at the pharmacy parking lot, at the ordinary Tuesday afternoon moving around her with complete indifference to the fact that her father had just dismantled a man's livelihood from behind a holding company because he could, because it cost him nothing, because that was what power did when it felt threatened. "Where's Lily?" Eva said. "School. She doesn't know yet." "What are you going to tell her?" "That the job changed, that it happens sometimes." A pause. "She'll be fine. Lily is... she adapts." The way he said it, the completeness of his faith in his daughter, even when his voice had that particular tightness of a man holding a difficult thing carefully, made Eva press her forehead briefly against the steering wheel. "This is my father's fault," she said, "not yours." "I know that too." "And you're still protecting me from being angry about it." "I'm not protecting you. I'm asking you to make the choice with clear eyes, not hot ones." He paused. "Your father's going to push. He's been pushing since the conference room. The question is what you actually want, Eva, not what you want to do to him. What you want for yourself. She lifted her head. She sat up straight. What did she want? She'd been asking herself that question for 3 years and answering it in the negative. Not this, not that, not what he's offering, not what they're managing me toward. Always knowing what she didn't want. Never quite standing still long enough to let the positive version of the answer take shape. I want to not be managed anymore, she said, quietly. Not to Daniel exactly, just out loud into the space of the car. I want to live in a way that's mine, not comfortable and empty. Mine. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Okay, he said. Okay? I mean, that's the answer. His voice was careful. What does that look like? What does mine look like? She thought about the mismatched soup bowls, the crayon drawings on the refrigerator, the wobble stool fixed in 15 minutes, Lily's Important Things collection, and the single silver star sprinkle, and the way that apartment had felt like the most honestly inhabited space she'd been inside since before the accident. Not like my father's house, she said. Okay. Another pause. Eva, for what it's worth, whatever you decide, whatever you do with him, with the house, none of it changes Wednesday mornings. None of it changes Sunday soup. That's not conditional on any of this. I need you to know that. She felt the tightness in her chest shift. Not gone, but changed. Lily really saved that bread, she said. She heard something in his voice that was almost a laugh. She labeled it in 3 colors, used her good markers. Eva pressed her eyes closed for just a second. I'm going to talk to my father. Today? Today. You want me to? No, she said, the same as before. But I'll call you after. I'll be here. She started the car. She didn't call ahead. She drove to the Lancaster house. Her house, technically. The one she'd grown up in. The one she'd lived in since the accident, because her father had structured everything to make it the easiest option. And she used her key, and she went inside, and she found her father in his study on the 2nd floor, with a phone to his ear. And she waited in the doorway until he saw her. He saw her. Something moved across his face. Not guilt, not quite, but something that had guilt's shape, a fractional flinching. He said something into the phone and ended the call. Eva, he said. Dalton Property Group, she said. He set his phone on the desk. Sit down, he said. I'd rather stand. A beat. Or stay where I am. You know what I mean. He stood up from behind his desk. That gesture again, the standing. She didn't know what it meant anymore. I told you I could make things difficult, he said. You told me that as a warning, not as a plan. She moved into the room. You pulled an 8-month contract 3 weeks before Christmas from a man raising a child alone. You did it through a shell company, so there'd be distance between your name and the action. She stopped. Do you understand what that is? That's not protection, Dad. That's punishment. I'm protecting you from... Stop. She said it quietly, but with a force that cut clean. Stop saying that. You have been saying that for 3 years, and I have been trying to translate it into something I could live with, and I can't anymore. She looked at him. What are you actually protecting me from? Say it out loud, not the management version, the real version. Her father looked at her. For a moment, she thought he'd deflect, reach for the boardroom voice, the folder, the pen. But something stopped him. The same crack she'd seen at Sunday dinner, the same gap in the facade. He looked, standing there in his study, like a man who was tired. Not physically, the other kind. From disappearing into someone else's life, he said. From giving up what you have, what your grandfather built, what I've built, for something that feels real right now and breaks later. Eva was quiet. "That's not nothing," she said. "I understand that fear." She paused.
But Dad, you know what you've been protecting me from, actually.
"You've been protecting me from being seen, from being chosen, from someone deciding I was worth singing to in a bakery for no reason except that his daughter asked him to." She felt her voice strain slightly at the edges and steadied it. "Do you know what it's like to spend 3 years having every need anticipated and managed, and not one single moment of someone just wanting to be in the room with you?" Her father said nothing. "I have been lonely inside this house," she said. "Not because you didn't provide. You provided everything. I was lonely because providing isn't the same as showing up. And you have never—" She stopped, took a breath. "You have never once called me just to hear my voice. You have never sat next to me and not had an agenda. You have never just been my dad without being my manager." The study was very quiet. Richard Lancaster looked at his daughter, and Eva watched him. Watched the precise, controlled man she had known her entire life do something she had never seen him do, not in 40 years of board meetings and negotiations, and the 1,000 hard situations a man like him moved through with a face like polished stone. His jaw worked. He looked away toward the window for a few seconds. When he looked back, his eyes were different, sharper in a way that meant they were wet, and he was not going to let them be. But the effort it was taking showed. "I don't know how to do what you're describing," he said. His voice was very low. It was the most honest thing he had ever said to her. Eva felt something break open in her chest. Not violently. The way ice breaks at the end of winter, slowly, from within, the thing that was rigid, becoming something that could move. "I know," she said. "I keep thinking if I fix the structure. I know, Dad. If I make it safe enough. Dad." She moved toward him. "I know." She stopped 2 feet from him, not close enough to touch, both of them too old in their grief for the easy thing, but close enough that the distance between them was no longer the length of a conference table. "But you can't fix structure into love. It doesn't work that way. You have to just show up. Imperfectly, without an agenda." She paused. "The way a 6-year-old girl walked across a bakery and asked if she could sit with a stranger. That's all. That's the whole thing." Her father looked at her. He didn't speak for a long moment. "The contract," he said finally. "Dalton, I'll have Gerald. I'll reverse it." "Today," she said. "Today." She nodded once. "And the trust," he said. "The conditions I asked Gerald about. I'll tell him to drop it." She held his eyes. "I need you to understand that if you do it again, any version of this, I meant what I said. I will leave this house. And it won't be because I'm angry. It'll be because I can't afford to stay somewhere that costs me who I'm becoming." He absorbed that. "Understood." She turned toward the door. She stopped. "Dad," she said it without turning around. "Next Saturday, there's a bakery on Clover Street." "Millstones." She paused. "Lily likes the croissants. They're made fresh on Fridays, so Saturday they're still good." Another pause. "I'm going to be there at 9. Daniel and Lily will probably be there." She let the silence hold for a moment. "You could come. Not to meet him, not to evaluate him. Just to come. To have a croissant. To sit with your daughter on a Saturday morning." She paused one last time. No agenda. She heard him breathe. "I'll think about it," he said. It was not a yes, but it was not a no. And from Richard Lancaster, at this moment, in this room, that was something. She left the study. She rode the elevator down. She went out through the front door and sat in her car for a minute, and then she called Daniel. He picked up on the first ring. "The contract is being reversed," she said. "Today. Gerald will call." A pause. "Eva, he's going to call today," she said. "And Daniel, I told him about the bakery. Saturday." "I told him he could come," she exhaled. "I don't know if he will, but I told him." A longer pause. "You okay?" Daniel asked. The same question as always. Simple. Direct. The kind that meant exactly what it asked. She looked through the windshield at her father's house. The stone facade. The manicured approach. The immovable permanence of a structure built to last forever and furnished with everything except warmth. "Yeah," she said. "I think I actually am." "Good." She heard something subtle in his voice. "Lily wants to know if she can teach you her card game on Sunday." "The one with 17 rules?" "She's up to 22 now." Despite everything, the conference room, the contract, the things said and unsaid in her father's study, the long exhale of a day that had cost her something, Eva Lancaster laughed. A real one. Short and surprised, the same way Daniel had laughed in his kitchen that first night. "Tell her yes," she said. "She's going to win." "She always wins." "Yeah," Daniel said. "She does." Eva started the car. Above her, in the second-floor study window, she could just make out the shape of her father, standing at the glass, watching her go. She drove away. She didn't look back. But she left the door open. Gerald Holt called Daniel on Thursday morning, as promised. Daniel was on a ladder when the number came through. A smaller job, a kitchen remodel in a house on Pembroke Avenue. The kind of work that paid steadily, if not extravagantly. And he climbed down and stepped outside into the cold December air and listened while the attorney explained, in the measured language of a man who had spent a career making uncomfortable things sound administrative, that the Dalton contract was being reinstated, effective immediately, with a written apology for the disruption and full compensation for the days lost. Daniel thanked him. He hung up. He stood in the cold for a minute with the phone in his hand. He didn't feel triumphant. He wasn't sure what he felt exactly. Something quieter than triumph. Something that had more to do with Eva standing in her father's study than with any contract being reinstated. Something that had to do with the image of her, that he'd constructed entirely from what she'd told him, because he hadn't been there. Moving into that room without asking anyone's permission, and saying the things that needed to be said without flinching. He climbed back up the ladder. He texted her at lunch. Gerald called. She responded in 4 minutes. "I know." He texted me too, making sure I knew he followed through. A pause, then, "He's trying." Daniel looked at those 2 words for a moment. He's trying. The way she wrote it, not with relief, not with cynicism, but with the careful, measured acknowledgement of someone who had learned not to overinvest in early gestures. She was doing the thing she'd told him she needed to do. Being both, hopeful and careful, held in balance. Neither one collapsing the other. He typed back, "That counts for something." "Yeah," she wrote. "I'm deciding how much." Saturday arrived gray and cold, the kind of December morning that smelled like wood smoke, and the end of things. Eva drove to Millstones early, 8:40, before Trevor had even flipped the sign, and sat in the parking lot for a few minutes, watching the light come on inside and the shapes of the morning begin to move. She had not told Daniel what she was feeling about the possibility of her father coming. She wasn't sure she could have named it cleanly. It was something between longing and self-protection, between the version of herself that had closed her eyes in this same parking lot on her birthday and made a wish, and the version that had sat across a conference table and refused to flinch. She was both of those women. She had been learning, slowly, that being both was not a contradiction. It was just what wholeness looked like when it was honest. Trevor let her in before the official opening. He did this sometimes without being asked, without making a thing of it. He just unlocked the door and held it, and went back behind the counter and started the machines. She had never thanked him in a way that felt sufficient, and she had accepted that some kindnesses existed in a register beyond adequate response. She ordered her coffee. She took the table near the window, her table, the one she'd been sitting at since the spring, the one where a little girl in a yellow raincoat had found her on a rainy Saturday and decided she needed company. She put her phone face up on the table. She waited. Daniel and Lily arrived at 9:03. Lily, already mid-sentence about something that had happened at school on Friday, involving a misunderstanding about whose turn it was to feed the classroom fish, which had escalated in ways that Lily felt the adults had handled poorly. She was wearing a new raincoat, red with small white stars, and the same frog boots that Eva had privately decided were immortal. She stopped when she saw Eva. The fish incident became immediately irrelevant. "You're here early." She said it like an accusation and a compliment at the same time. "I am." Lily climbed onto the chair across from her and studied Eva's face with the focused attention she brought to things she considered important. "You look like you're waiting for something." "I am." "What?" Daniel sat down beside his daughter. He looked at Eva with the quiet, steady look that she'd come to understand was his version of a question. The one that asked how she was doing underneath how she was doing. "My father might come," Eva said. She said it to both of them, simply, without preamble. Lily's eyes went wide. "Your dad?" "He might. I'm not sure if he will." Lily turned to Daniel with an expression of great significance. "Daddy, her dad might come." "I heard," Daniel said. "Should we be nice?" "We're always nice, Lily." "I know, but—" Lily turned back to Eva with the seriousness of a 6-year-old who has taken on a responsibility. "Should I be extra nice? Because sometimes, when things are important, I can do extra." Eva looked at her, at the complete, uncomplicated sincerity in that face, at the willingness, so natural it didn't even register as generosity, to simply open wider when something mattered. "Just be yourself," Eva said. "That's already extra." Lily nodded, satisfied, and reached for the menu she already knew by heart. At 9:24, the door opened. Eva knew before she turned around. She felt it, the particular quality of attention that shifts in a room when someone enters who carries weight. She had grown up around that quality. She knew its texture. She turned. Richard Lancaster stood in the doorway of Millstones in a coat that was too formal for the neighborhood and shoes that had never touched a sidewalk like this one. And he looked, for the first time in Eva's recent memory, uncertain. Not managed uncertain, not the performance of humility that powerful men sometimes deployed tactically. Actually uncertain. The uncertainty of a man standing at the edge of something he didn't have a procedure for. He saw Eva. She raised her hand. A small gesture, just a wave. Something shifted in his face. He came in. Trevor looked up from the counter. He assessed the situation with the quiet competence he brought to everything, and he said, "Morning. What can I get you?" in a tone that was perfectly ordinary and exactly right. Richard Lancaster ordered a black coffee. He carried it to the table himself. He stood at the edge of it, at the edge of the small circle of them, Eva and Daniel and Lily and the morning. And for a moment nobody said anything. Lily looked up at him from her chair. She looked at him the way she'd looked at Eva on that first birthday morning. Directly, openly, without the social static that adults accumulated over years of learning to look away from things. "You're Eva's dad," she said. Richard Lancaster looked at the small girl in the red raincoat. "I am," he said. "I'm Lily," She extended her hand with a formality she reserved for introductions she considered official.
That's my dad. He's Daniel.
Richard shook her hand. Eva watched him do it. Watched the precise, controlled man adjust almost imperceptibly to the register of a 6-year-old who expected to be taken seriously. "Daniel," Richard said, and he looked at him. Daniel stood. He was 3 inches taller than Richard Lancaster and had none of his money and every bit of his steadiness. He extended his hand. "Mr. Lancaster." They shook hands. It was brief. It was not warm. But it was 2 men in the same room choosing, without collusion, to be civil. And civility, Eva knew, was sometimes where everything had to start. Richard sat down. Lily offered him a croissant immediately, on the grounds that they were made fresh on Fridays. He took it. He didn't know what to do with it for a moment. Richard Lancaster was not a man who ate croissants with his hands at small tables. But he held it, and that was something. "Eva tells me you come here on Wednesdays," he said. He was looking at Daniel, measuring still. Eva could see it. But underneath the measuring, something else, something that was trying. "Most Wednesdays," Daniel said. "It started by accident." "Things that matter usually do," Richard said. The table was quiet for a moment. Then Lily said, with the conversational energy of someone who found silence inefficient, "Did you know the croissants here are better than the ones at that fancy place on 5th? I did a test. Daddy let me." Richard Lancaster looked at the 6-year-old. "What kind of test?" "A taste test." She said it as if this were obvious. "You have to try both on the same day so your tongue remembers. And you can't drink anything in between. I wrote it down." A pause. "I can show you my results." Richard's mouth moved. It was not quite a smile, not yet. But it was the shape that came just before one, and Eva, watching her father's face, felt something move in her chest with a force she hadn't prepared for. She had not seen that shape on his face in 3 years, maybe longer. "I would like to see your results," he said. Lily beamed. They stayed for 1 hour and 40 minutes. It was not easy. There were silences that lasted too long, and moments where Richard said something in his boardroom voice, without meaning to. And Eva watched Daniel absorb it with the patience of a man who had learned that some things needed time and not confrontation. There were moments where Eva felt the 2 halves of her life sitting at the same table and could feel the strain of it, the way a beam feels when weight is distributed across it unevenly. But there was also this: Lily explaining her card game to Richard Lancaster with complete authority, Richard listening with genuine attention because Lily's certainty demanded it. Daniel telling a story about a job that had gone wrong in a way that turned out right, and Richard asking a follow-up question that meant he'd actually been listening. Trevor bringing a second round of coffees without being asked, and Richard saying thank you in a way that wasn't automatic. Small things, the kind that don't announce themselves. And at one point, Eva would think about this later, alone, in the quiet of her room. Her father looked at her across the table, in the middle of something Lily was saying about the caterpillar that had become a butterfly, and he said nothing. He just looked at her. And in the looking, there was something she had been waiting for, she realized, for most of her life. Not an apology, not an explanation, just recognition. The look of a man seeing, clearly and without the buffer of management or agenda, his daughter. Who she was, where she was. That she was, despite everything, all right. She held his eyes. She nodded once. He nodded back. It was not a resolution. It was not the end of the hard work or the long, complicated history of what they were to each other, but it was a beginning of a different kind. The kind that starts not with grand gestures, but with 2 people at a small table choosing, without certainty, to try. They walked out together when it was over, all four of them, onto the sidewalk where the December cold hit clean and sharp. Lily immediately identified a puddle and deployed the frog boots for their intended purpose. Daniel caught Eva's eye and made an expression that said, "Every time, without fail." She almost laughed. Richard Lancaster stood to the side, buttoning his coat. He looked at Eva. "Thank you," he said, "for telling me to come." "You came," she said. "That was you." He was quiet for a moment. "She's remarkable," he said. He meant Lily, who was now explaining to the puddle why it existed. "She doesn't perform anything." "No," Eva said. "She never does." He looked at Daniel, who was standing nearby with his hands in his jacket pockets, close enough to be present, but far enough to give them space. That precise, unassuming consideration he had for other people's moments. Her father stopped, started again. "He's good with her." "He's good at everything he does," Eva said simply, "because he does it honestly." Her father absorbed that. "I'm going to ask Gerald to look at the trust again," he said. "Not conditions. The original terms. I want to make sure you have access to what you need. On your terms." "Thank you," she said. He nodded. He looked like a man who had more to say and didn't have the words for it yet. And she recognized that look, because she had worn it herself for most of her adult life. She understood now that the words would come or they wouldn't, and that what mattered more than the words was the decision to keep showing up until the language arrived. "Sunday dinners," she said. He looked at her. "What?" "You and me. Not a meeting, not an agenda. Sunday dinner, once a month." She held his eyes. "You cook. You always used to cook on Sundays when I was little. Before—" She stopped. "Before the company got bigger and the Sundays got scheduled." He was very still. "You remember that?" he said. His voice was different. The boardroom coat completely gone, just for a moment. "Scrambled eggs and toast," she said. "You always burned the toast a little, and you acted like you meant to." Something crossed his face that she had no word for. Something old and real and preserved somehow under 40 years of accumulated authority. "I did mean to," he said quietly. "Slightly burned is better." "It isn't," she said. "It is." They looked at each other, and there it was. That thing she'd been trying to find her way back to, that she'd thought perhaps was gone forever, buried under conference rooms and credited accounts, and the long, cold management of a grief neither of them had ever properly named. It wasn't gone. It was just small and old and waiting, the way certain things wait, patient past all reason, for someone to finally look. "Sunday dinners," her father said. "Once a month." "Slightly burned toast," she said. His mouth moved. This time, it completed itself. A small, real smile. Not the boardroom version, not the society column version. The one she remembered from before. "I'll work on it," he said. He said goodbye to Lily, who hugged him without warning around the middle with both arms, which appeared to momentarily override all of Richard Lancaster's operational systems. He stood there for a second with his arms slightly raised, unsure of the protocol. And then he put one hand on the back of her red raincoat, briefly, carefully, like someone holding something they understood to be fragile and important. He shook Daniel's hand again. This time, it lasted a half-second longer. He walked to his car. Eva watched him go. He was still too formal for the neighborhood. His coat still wrong for Clover Street. His shoes still the shoes of a man who lived in a world made of different materials than this one. He was not changed. He was not transformed by a single Saturday morning at a bakery. Because people didn't work that way, not even in stories. And this was not a story. It was a life, complicated and unresolved and ongoing. But he had come. He had shaken a carpenter's hand and listened to a 6-year-old's croissant research and looked at his daughter across a small table and seen her. It was not nothing. It was, in fact, everything that beginnings were made of. Lily had moved on from the puddle and was now attempting to convince Daniel that they should get a second breakfast because the walk back to the car counted as exercise. He was explaining, with admirable composure, why that logic had some structural issues. Eva watched them and felt the morning settle around her. The cold air, the smell of coffee still on her coat, the particular quality of light on a December Saturday that had no agenda. She felt the weight of the last 2 months in her body, not as burden, but as ballast. The birthday cake she hadn't eaten, the 11 words on a screen, the 4 words that had changed everything. The conference room, the soup in mismatched bowls, the star sprinkle in the plastic bag. Her father's face learning, slowly and imperfectly, to let something real show through. Daniel looked over at her. "You okay?" Same question. Always the same question. "Yeah," she said. Same answer, but different now. Fuller, truer, no longer a deflection. He held her eyes for a moment. Then he said, quietly enough that Lily didn't hear, "For what it's worth, I think you're one of the bravest people I've ever met." She blinked. "I haven't done anything remarkable." "You kept showing up," he said, "when things were hard and uncertain and there was no guarantee. You kept showing up." He paused. "That's the whole thing. That's all bravery ever actually is." She held that. She thought about the girl in the blue dress in the portrait who used to sprint across the lawn and throw herself at life. She had thought, for a long time, that girl was gone. That the accident had taken her, and what remained was someone more careful, more managed, more contained. Someone who measured and calculated and kept her weight evenly distributed so nothing could knock her sideways. But standing on this sidewalk, on a December morning outside a bakery called Millstones, with a carpenter who said true things, and a 6-year-old who kept a silver star sprinkle in a plastic bag, because good days should be kept somewhere safe, Eva understood that the girl wasn't gone. She had just been waiting for somewhere worth throwing herself at. Lily grabbed her hand. "Come on. Daddy said no second breakfast, but he didn't say no hot chocolate, and those are different categories." "They're absolutely the same category," Daniel said. "They're not. Eva, tell him." Eva looked at Daniel. He looked back at her. The steady eyes, warm and patient, and completely without agenda. "They're different categories," she said. Daniel raised both hands in surrender. Lily pulled Eva forward, toward the bakery door, toward the warmth inside, and Eva let herself be pulled. Not because she was passive, not because she had stopped measuring, but because some things were worth stopping the measuring for. Some things were worth leaning into without calculating the distance to the ground. She had made a wish on an unlit candle on her 22nd birthday, and she had not wished for her legs back, and she had not wished for her father to be different, and she had not wished for anything that required the world to rearrange itself on her behalf. She had wished to feel, just for a little while, like she was not invisible. She was not invisible. She was seen, clearly, fully, without condition, by a man who built things with his hands and said true things without decoration, and by a child who understood that everything had feelings and that good days should be kept somewhere safe, and by a father who was learning, late and imperfectly, that love was not a structure you built around someone, but a choice you made to keep showing up. She was 22 years old, and she had her whole life in front of her, unmanaged and uncertain, and genuinely, completely hers. The door to Millstones opened. The warmth came out to meet her. Eva Lancaster went in.